To create a virtual machine, log into the portal manage.windowsazure.com. Click on the virtual machines. Click create virtual machine. In this case, we're going to do a quick create. I'm going to pick the DNS NH Cloud VM1. I'm going to pick 2012 and I'm going to set my password. I will leave it small. I'm going to use the East Zone. I'm changing my subscription to this one and then click create virtual machines. It may take up to 8 minutes. Now the VM is ready. You can remote into the VM by clicking on the connect icon. Now let's create a new VM. And this time we're going to use from gallery option and we're going to pick Windows Server 2012 because we're going to configure the load balancing. I'm going to call it as NH Cloud VM2 and username is administrator. Set the password. Click next. So since we are adding a load balancing, we're going to say connect to existing virtual machines. In this case, it's automatically selected. There is only one image. If you have more than one VM, you can pick the one you want. And then use automatically generate storage account. And I use the East US. Click next. And you can leave it none. And then click create. It's going to take again 8 to 10 minutes. Now the VM2 is ready. You can connect, get into the remote desktop and install the software. We'll do it in a minute. Now click on the VM1, click endpoints, and then add an endpoint. You can say next. It's a primary VM. We're going to call it as IIS 8.0 TCP port 80 and then the port 80. So we're creating the port 80 endpoint. Once that's ready, the port 8 endpoint is ready now. Now if you look at the field load balance, it says no. Now we can load balance it. Now go back to the VM2 and endpoints, add endpoints. Now this time we're going to pick load balance to port 80. Click next. You can give a name. And say OK. Now if you look at the value, it says load balanced yes. It may take up to 10 minutes. Now the machine 2 port is configured and its load balance says yes. Now let's get back to machine 1. Open up the port and make sure it's load balanced. Now it is load balancing to VM1 and VM2. Let's close this. Now click on the VM again, dashboard, click on the connect. So we're going to remote into the VM to configure the web server. I'll type my password. Now still connecting. So once you remote in, you can click on the manage link to add roles and features. Now you need to turn on application server, web server, and under the web server, next ASP.NET 4.5. and then web server IIS support. Next, you can run install now, or you can use the command window. So let's run the install now from here, and then you go back to the other window and install everything using the PowerShell. I'm going to say install. Now let's remote into the other VM, which is VM2. Let's check the status. It's still installing. Let's connect to the VM2. Open, connect. Okay, let's turn on the same features from here, but this time we're going to use the PowerShell. So we're going to import the modules. Okay, now we're going to add Windows feature. Application server. App server, comma, net framework 45 features. It's installing the application server, web server, net framework 4.5 features. This can take about 5 to 10 minutes, I believe. Let's get back to the VM1. All the features are installed. Let's go ahead and verify. Next. So we got application server installed and then web server support installed. And the web server configured correctly. Okay. Now let's get back to the mission 2. Check from the manage, it's completed. I'll check. Okay, application server installed correctly, but I think the web server did not install. Support web server IIS support is not added correctly. You can check it or click next, or we can do it from the command PowerShell window. At this time, let's do it from the PowerShell window. So the code is web server support. It's under application server, so you can go back to over here. Yes, web support. Yes, web support. Go to configure. Okay, it's done. Now we can verify from here. Let's check on the application server, and this time the web server support is installed. Let's close this window. At this time we completed configuring the IIS on both machines, VM1 and VM2, and they are ready to load balance. Now let's create some app and deploy into these VMs. Let's create a new website so we can deploy into our VMs. So launch the VS 2012. New project. I'm going to call it as demo web. I'm going to use the MVC4 template, the Razor engine. Let's modify the view so we know which machine it's coming from. I'm going to add a little bit over here. I can display the machine name. Right. Let's run this app locally. It's not a great app. It's just a sample app comes out of the box from the Visual Studio. We're just going to deploy it and see how it works in our VMs. So as you can see, the machine name displays over here, so we may be able to see which machine the file served from, either VM1 or VM2. So we're going to close this, stop it. Now copy the files into our VMs. Now we're going to go to directory here. I'm going to copy this entire root folder, copy, and go back to our VMs. Back to computer, C drive, inetpub, www root. I'm going to paste it over here. It's going to take a while. At the same time, I'm going to copy these files into my VM2. Okay, now let's launch the IIS. Let's go to the sites. So we have that site. Let's create into application and everything default. Say OK. If you go back to the advanced settings, and it's using the default app pool, makes it uses the 4.0 framework. Now do the same thing on the other machine. Go back to the machine A, IIS. Gonna convert that to application. It's ready. Now we're going to browse with nh cloud vm1 slash demo web as a subdirectory, virtual app. But if you want to install it in the root, you can create a new site and you copy your templates to the root site, or you can even copy the templates to inetpub www root and call it from the root. Now we created the VM. We copied some sample application to our VMs1 and VM2, and the site is ready to browse. Now if you go back to when you create a VM, configure the persisted VM, it creates the cloud service. In that cloud service, it goes to the first VM name. That's what we fixed as a primary, and the other one we added into this VM for load balancing. If you expand it, if you browse this URL, it's going to hit randomly either NH Cloud VM1 or VM2. So here is the endpoint. We're going to click on it, which is the root site, but we deployed as app demo web. And here it is. It's coming from the VM NH Cloud VM1. If you keep reloading it, it's NH Cloud VM2, VM2, now VM1. So it's simultaneously hitting either VM1 or VM2. So what we had seen now is how to create a VM using the quick deployment, how to create a VM using the gallery, and we added them into a load balancing. Now we created a simple app and deployed them into a VM1 and VM2, and we were able to browse it from here. Let's see how we can bring a SQL Server VM. Let's create a SQL VM and then connect from our two load balanced VM called VM1 and VM2. To do that, we're going to go new VM from gallery. We're going to pick SQL Server 2012. call it as nh cloud SQL VM1 dish name. I'll make it a little bigger to go because the SQL Server need lots of RAM. I go next. In this case, I'm going to say connect to the existing machines because we're going to connect it in a one row. We're going to pick the VM1 here. That's the primary endpoint that we exposed outside. Click next. We can come back to the ability set later, but for now we will leave it default. Create it. It's going to take about 10 minutes. Now the SQL VM is ready. Let's attach disk. So I'm going to attach an empty disk. 50, click on it. It's going to take a while. Let's attach another disk. This is the default size 50. So we attached two disks, one for logs, one for backup. Now if you look at the dashboard, we see the two data disks. So this is where we're going to write the logs and backups. Now let's remote into the VM. Let's have computer management. Let's go to the disk management, and we are able to see the two disks that we created. Let's create a new simple volume, attach to the F drive. Let's wait until the format is done. I think we can start simultaneously. Put them into G drive. Let's call it as logs backup. Let's call it as logs. Okay, let's go back to system. We got two drives created, F and G. So let's create a new folder called logs. Let's create a new folder called backup. I can also create data over here too. Let's do this. Let's create data over here. Let's create a log on the other drive. Let's go to the partition. Just rename this one to data. Data backup. We have G backup and G logs, and we have F data. Now let's open up the SQL Server. Enterprise Manager. So this is the configuration. The SQL Server is installed and the VM is ready. Now we need to configure the logins and then the proper data directory and the backup directory so that it directly writes onto the blob storage, and that is replicated to two more copies of the one for the same region and two for the one for the another region. Just loading a first time, it takes a little longer. Okay, first thing, let's go to security logins. So we're going to connect from the other VM. So we're going to change the SA password. If you want, you can create new user. For this demo, I'm going to use the default user account SA. I'm going to call it as not enforcing the password. So mapping is done. And turn on the status. And let's go to the properties of the service. And then let's make both SQL Server and Windows authentication modes. SQL mode is one we are going to use to connect from the other two VMs. Say OK. Yes. We need to restart this service to make effect on the changes. Say yes. Alright. Now let's make sure whether it be able to connect from the SQL. Here's the SQL authentication. Yes. Password, connect. Let's connect. Okay, we are able to connect using the SQL authentication. Now let's create a new database so we can use it. Before we do that, we have to attach our disks. Let's go here, properties, and then we're going to change these drives. This is going to be f:/data /logs /backup. Say okay. Restart. Now let's create a new database called sample db, and this by default is going to go to ftdata on glogs. Let's create a new table. Create table sample. Identity. Come on. Not null. Primary key. Cluster. v1 in var of 50. Date. Modified. Daytime. Default. Get date. Let's put this into order ID. Product name. You got the table created. Let's insert the table. Insert into sample. Product name values. Computer. TV. LCD monitor. Robot. Okay, so if I run the query, select query, we got 4 product we can display in our site. So this is done. Let's close this window. We have the database called sample db. We created a table called sample and we have some rows. Now let's leave the profiler on so that we know that VM1 and VM2 connecting to this machine. I can connect through the Windows authentication. Skip the minimum record tracing. I'm going to remove everything. I just leave that on SQL patch completed alone. And so all columns. Let's remove the CPU read write duration. Let's have the host name selected here. Alright, let's move the host name over this side. Okay, now we have created a database, we created a table, we attached 2 disks, one for data, one for logs and backup, and our SQL instance is ready, and this is running part of the our cloud service NH Cloud VM1. Now let's go and change the sample application to connect to this database and deploy them into the VMs. Right. Now we're going to change our application a little bit so that it talks to our SQL Server instance. So I'm adding a new connection string called sample DB, and that's the machine name that we created, and the database name and the username and provider name is SQL client. To test that, I put a simple code over here. It's configuring to the data set, which has the simple read from the sample table, and using the connection string sample DB and move them to the data table, and then I put a little div tag here and display the order ID and the product name for all the rows in the data table. So let's compile this, save it, and copy this template. We only changed two templates, sorry, one template. It's index.chhtml and the web.config. Let's compile this, make sure it compiles correctly. So now let's go back to the folder and copy these two files. So that file comes into the view, so we're going to copy view and web.config and paste it into VM1, and then let's move this into VM2. Okay, so now we made the template changes, we moved into VM1 and VM2. Now if we hit the page from here, okay, so we got kind of error. Check the SQL machine whether we have done everything correctly. Let's go back to the SQL box and then open up the firewall. I think part of the requirement is that we need to allow the inbound connection, so we're going to add the inbound rules. It's a new rule. We're going to let allow by port. Next, we're going to say 1433. Allow the connections. The name is SQL Server inbound, finish. Now let's try the connections. This is what supposed to be doing last time, but we forget it. But let's try browse the page from the local machine. Okay, this time we didn't get an error. We got the data. This is the data we inserted 1 and 2 or 3. Now let's go back to the machine 1 and browse the page. Let's leave this page. Okay, we didn't get the error, we got the values listed over here. Now let's browse from outside, go back to the portal here, go back to the cloud services, is our cloud service. Click on the endpoint URL. Before we do that, let's go ahead and clear these traces so we know who is getting it over here. And demo web. So host 1, just keep reloading it. Okay, now I got the host 2. So there is a 4 query coming from host 1, the other 2 hits coming from the host 2. So it shows that you can connect, this proves you can connect SQL VM from the other 2 web VMs. So far we discussed how to create a VM in quick view, and then using the gallery, and then we created the SQL VM, and we deployed a simple app, and we also seen how it how you can connect the SQL from the web VMs. Let's see how we can bring the virtual networks. Let's explore the virtual networks. To do that, let's click on the network and create a new virtual networks. And here I'm going to call it as NH Cloud VNet. And I'm going to create a new affinity group. I'm going to use the East US affinity group name, NH Cloud Affinity. And I'm going to use this subscription. Click next. In the address space, I'm going to configure 192.168.0.0-16. And the name, you can give any name you want. I'm going to call it as app subnet. One nine two dot 168.1.0-24. Add that one, and then click next. The DNS servers leave it default, and let it create. Let's create a new network so that we can connect from the past model, which is platform as a service, such as web role and worker role. To create a virtual network, click on the create virtual network, give the name NHVNet, and then pick the affinity group. Next, type the IP address 192.168.0. Now the network is ready. Let's create a VM. I'm going to create a new VM. Next, cloud going to select the virtual network VNet, click next, configure the subnet, and then create. It's going to take a while. Now the VM is ready. Let's attach the disk 50. Now the SQL VNet VM is ready with the SQL 2012. I have attached two disk drives and also remote onto the computer and configured them. The first thing I did is I configured the firewall rule on port 1433 so that the PaaS service can connect to these. And the second thing, go to the computer management and then configure those two empty disks to be attached, format and attached to F and G drive respectively. The F is going to be used for data, G is for logs and backups. And then go back to the enterprise manager and configure the logins, SA, change the password, and the service level change both Windows security to Windows and SQL authentication, and reconfigure the path to AF data, G logs and backups, and then restart the service. And I also created a sample database with one table in it called a sample that has a few rows in it, so we'll be using it for read those data from the PaaS service. And also we need an IP address so that we can connect from the PaaS. Since we use the VNet, the IP address is going to be 192.168.1.4. So since we configured VNet to start with that IP 192.168, we'll be using this IP address to connect from the PaaS service. And now our SQL VM is ready. Let's work on the PaaS project. To create a cloud project, launch the Visual Studio and create a new project. And this time we're going to pick the cloud template. We're going to call it as Cloud Service 1. And I'm going to use the ASP.NET Web Role template. Edit CS Web Role. I'm going to say OK. So we created the projects. The project has the two solution has the two projects. One is the CS Web Role, other one is the cloud service itself. We call it a CS Service 1, CS Web Role. And now we need to insert this network configuration, which won't be part of the default cloud config, but we added it. So our VNet name is NHVNet, and our role name is App Web Role, and the subnet is App Subnet. So it's going to go through that subnet. We also modified this template a little bit to talk to the SQL Server. We open up the default.aspx. We insert the grid view so we can see what's going on, and we also modified some queries to run against it so we can bind that query to that grid view. And we change the connection string to have the sample DB connection string. Now let's publish this package to the cloud. Go to Publish Wizard. If you go to the previous step, I'm going to pick that subscription. I pre-configured it, but you can configure anytime you want. And I'm going to deploy into the NHD and production slot. And then I publish. It's going to take about 10-15 minutes. And once the publish over, the service is ready for us. Now our cloud service is deployed successfully. Let's go back to the portal and check the URL. Before we check the URL, let's make sure it hits our VNet configured SQL Server. So it's over here. Then if you look at the URL, click and it loads the data, and here it is the query. So this you can integrate the PaaS services into IaaS services. Now let's move on to the next topic. The next topic is how we can create a image based on the VM so that we can quickly provision the new image. So such as pre-configuring the software, so creating a default websites or running some remote commands. So we can use for anything. So once we create the image, we can quickly provision the new website, new VMs using that image. To do that, I'm going to go to the management portal. I already created a VM. So I'm going to remote into that VM. Here it is. I'm going to turn on some PowerShell command. The sample, the demo we're going to see is the how we can remote HTTP remote into this machine once we create the VM. So to do that, I'm going to use the PowerShell. This comes the hands-on lab sample. So I'm going to set the policy. Set remote signed. Now I have two scripts to do that. I'm going to copy those two scripts to this machine. I create a new folder called enable PS remote and then copy those script. So what this script does is this let you connect from your client machine to this machine using HTTP, and that the task scheduler we're going to schedule it through the group policy, so that once the reimage is once you create the VM using this reimage, automatically runs as a startup task. Now let's go and bring the MMC. Let's do the file action. We're going to use the group policy object, local computer. Okay, and expand it. Let's double click the script startup, the startup. Let's add some files, browse. The script parameter we can leave it. Apply. Okay. So now we configured it. So that command, that CMD file command file is going to run when the machine startups. Now we have done everything. Now we're going to sysprop it so that we can create the image of it. Very generalized the machine copy. Let's go to command window again. Sysprop. You can say shutdown. So once sysprop is done, it's going to shut down the machine, and now we can capture that image. Now the VM is ready for the capture, and click on the VM, click capture. It's going to ask you image name. I can say image cloud 2012 image. I have syspropped it, and this is going to delete this virtual machine so that we can create a new virtual machine off of this image. It may take a few minutes. Now the image is ready. Let's create a new VM off of that image. For that, click on the new virtual machines. Click on the my images, and that image appears over there. Click next, and we can say VM4. Leave it small. Click next. pick that East US. I'll leave the default for the availability set and create. It's going to create a new VM based on that NH Cloud 2012 image. Now the image is ready. Let's go and add the TCP endpoint so that we can remote HTTP in it. Add endpoint. And call it as a remote PSHTTP TCP 5986. Submit. Once it's done, we're going to connect from our client to view the files in the remote computer. The remote PSHTTP endpoint is ready. Let's go back to our client machine and then open up the PowerShell. And I have some command which is enter PSSM, and I'm going to connect to the NH Cloud VM4, which is the VM that we created off of our image. Now I'm going to enter it. It's going to ask me the credentials. Once I do that, it's let me connect to that machine. Now if I do a C drive, now that's the drive we had it. List the files. That's the files that we had it. So this is how we can create the VM using our disk image.